Hi, it's me again. Instead of a saga tonight, or even an epic, I decided to just take a compilation of some of the stupid little things that we did in graduate school while being paid luxuriously by the University of Delaware. As a matter of fact, I earned $2,100 a year as a graduate assistant. The first year I didn't have that. I helped out with the graduate lab, and they paid me something for that. But then in my second year, I met a Dr. Tripp who took me under his wing. He had three or four other graduate students, and we would do his research. But at the same time, we then had to do our own research because we were, trying to get a degree too. But I was paid $2,100 a year to work for Dr. Tripp, and and but that's not really the point of the story. That's only a part of the story. Some of the silly little things that happen to a graduate student like me or the people that I surrounded myself with. You know what hydrochloric acid is? It's really nasty. You don't want to put that on your face or in your mouth, especially if it is concentrated. I don't mean like it's no, when you water it down with water enough, you can dip your hand in it, nothing will happen, probably. But anyhow, they give you a glass pipette with little marks on it, 1 milliliter, 2 milliliters, three, like that, and a little rubber bulb at the end. And so if you want to add 2 milliliters or 1 milliliter of whatever liquid to your experimental jar or auger plate, whatever, you take, and then you take it over and by drop, you put it in. But after you're a graduate student like I was, I mean, you know the ropes, no problem. We don't need this bulb. Okay? Drop. Except one time when I wasn't paying attention, I just and I took concentrated hydrochloric acid. Now you can say that's impossible, or you wouldn't be here to tell me. Well, if you're real quick at spitting something out, running to the sink, putting your head under the faucet, and flushing your mouth out with water, you don't do too much damage. I really didn't do too much damage. My tongue was okay, my lips were okay, but my teeth, what was left, as you can say, what was left of them now, I had a lot more teeth then. They lost their sheen. They were rough. It was as though I had taken a rasp and it took years before they came. They didn't fall out, but they just were rough. Yeah, you can tell with your tongue. That was nothing. Around, I think it was probably in the same year, I was in a lab and I'm working with sodium hydroxide, which is the opposite of hydrochloric acid. Instead of being very acidic, it's very basic. And again, I haven't learned my lesson. Why do I need this bulb? Or just and I took concentrated sodium hydroxide into my mouth. And immediately I knew that I had done something very bad. And I ran to the sink, and they had these big curvature water dispensers. I was able to get my head underneath it upside down, let it run into, and my buddies are around me out, cheering me on. Spit it out, Lou, spit it out. And the teacher walks into the room, immediately sees what has happened, knows, figures out it's that stupid Bisignani guy again. And he calmly says to me as I'm shouting as best you can with water going in and splashing out of your mouth, it's not working, it's not working. He said, you should have used milk. And what he was giving me was advice for the next time. Uh, because see, water bounces off. It's almost like a gel in your mouth, like a jelly or like a, you know, you can dissolve it in water, but the water just hits it and bounces off. It doesn't get through to your skin underneath this thing that's burning you. Milk, on the other hand, cuts through it and you could get it out of your mouth fast. Anyhow, I got it out of my mouth. However, for the next 3 days, I couldn't smoke. My lips were all swollen. My tongue was swollen. It hurt just to look at myself. And if I put a cigarette there, I wanted to smoke because when you're a smoker, you want to smoke. We don't care about the lips or the tongue. The lungs need their chocolate candy. So if I put a cigarette there, and just the hot air passing across my inside of my mouth, burned for 3 days. And then it went away, and I lived. A friend of mine, another graduate student, called me up in the middle of the night. He was doing an experiment with cyanide, a poison, a strong poison, and he would use that to stop enzyme reactions in the little bugs, the little flies he was working with. It would kill the fly, but it would also stop the enzyme reaction of the reaction, the chemical reaction he was studying. He called me in the middle of the night and said, Lou. He was a very nervous guy, good friend of mine. Lou, what is it? What is it? I was half asleep. What is it, Tom? And he said, I just swallowed some cyanide solution. And I said, oh my God. I don't know. I said, well, what was the concentration? And he told me the concentration. And in those days, I understood what he was saying. That was 40 years ago. That was 50 years ago. And I don't remember anymore, but it was a certain amount of concentration. And I realized it was a very weak solution of cyanide. I said, oh, that's not too bad. When did you do it? He said, oh, I think it was about 20 minutes ago. I said, oh, you'd be dead by now. And he was okay. He came over to the house anyway. Nancy and I got up, gave him some coffee, patted him on the back, sat with him for a couple of hours, but he was okay. The last thing I want to say is again about stupid graduate students, and then it's not a story, it's a compilation. It's a different friend of mine who was a graduate student, and I argued vehemently for months over this, and this is how crazy you can get to be when you're a graduate student. He was studying pigeon ears. Birds can hear, they can hear. And he would, I guess he would work with dead ears and take the ear out and study it under the microscope. But what I was an oyster man. I don't know anything about pigeons except that they can fly to the right, fly home from hundreds of miles away. And he was so convinced that hearing was the most important sense for pigeons and for us and for everybody. Whereas I argue that I would prefer to lose my hearing over my eyesight. I like the eyesight. I said I can read a book. I can look at a setting sun, and you get very romantic and poetic when you're a graduate student. Setting sun, and he would say, no, but I can listen to an opera if I was blind, but my ears work. That's nonsense, right? Okay. So after months of this kind of arguing, I'm in my lab by 1 o'clock in the morning. The building is empty. I have a key to the building. I used to go in there late at night and take care of my little oyster studies. Sometimes you got to do something at midnight or at 6 o'clock in the morning. So anyhow, I'm in there at 1 o'clock in the morning doing something, getting ready to go home. I'm all done. The security guard who goes through every hour or so to the various buildings, had already gone through maybe 10 minutes before I was getting ready to go. So I was alone. And I'm a smoker. I wasn't at that time. Got an ashtray over here, putting out my last cigarette before I leave, butting it out. And I realized I've gotten some ashes spilled onto my desk from the ashtray. So naturally, I'm a very neat guy, as you probably know. I pick up the ashtray and blow the ashes off the desk. However, my blowing took much of the ashes, not only out of the ashtray and onto the table, but up into my eyes. And I was totally blinded. I couldn't open my eyes. I had two eyes full of cigarette ash. And I sat there like this with my eyes closed for a few minutes trying to think what's going to happen now. The guy won't come back for an hour. Nancy is at home in bed alone with the little babies, and she's going to get worried. There was no such thing as a cell phone. There was a phone in my advisor's office for which I did not have the key. What am I going to do? I got up, felt my way out of the office into the hallway, felt my way down the hallway, and found a lab that I knew had a sink in it. My little office didn't have a sink in it, of course, but there was a big, a sink in it with the big thing. And I got to that sink. I turned the water on. I put my face underneath it to try to wash the ashes out, both. And I could just barely open my eyes, but they immediately closed because it hurt. It wasn't doing me any good. What am I going to do? So I got my way back to my office. I'm sitting there thinking I have to wait almost an hour for this man to come back, and will he then give me a ride home? I don't know what's going to happen. And I hear footsteps. I hear footsteps in the hallway. Who can that be? Who can that be? And I shout out, "Hello, hello, who is it? I'm in my office, office 107. Can you help me?" And up comes the footsteps, speed up, and they get close to my door, and I hear a voice standing in my doorway, and it's my friend who studies pigeon ears. And he says, "What happened?" I said, "I blew some ashes out of. I was trying to clean up, and they're in my eyes. I can't see." And he says, "Aha! But you heard me, didn't you?" And I looked. I didn't look at him. I wanted to punch him, but I just said, "Yes, I concede. I concede the point. Ears are more important than eyes." So he drove me home. And the next day, because Nancy couldn't help me, we went to the kitchen sink the next morning. I went to bed like that, and she tried to wash my eyes out and couldn't. I went to I think it was my dentist, either a dentist or a doctor, I forget who, and he flushed my eyes out very nicely, and I was fine. There was no damage done, just that it was crunchy under there, under your eyelid. But that's how I lost the argument about the eyes versus the ears to this other guy that was a friend of mine. And so that's just a few of the adventures of graduate school. I have lots more, but time is fleeting. So see you again in the future, I hope.